without further ado, welcome to this evening's webinar hosted by the National Trust here at Saltram and Plymbridge. My name's Ellie, and in just a moment, our rangers will be gallivanting you through an absolute feast of working in, with and for nature, giving you the lowdown of exactly what being a ranger is all about and how they're helping to encourage flora and fauna to flourish in two super busy green spaces in Plymouth. So just a bit about Green Minds. So what is Green Minds? You may have heard of this project. It's a really fantastic partnership project with 7 different organisations around Plymouth. So Plymouth City Council, Devon Wildlife Trust, Plymouth College of Arts, Plymouth University, the Real Ideas organisation and the Data Place, as well as us here at the National Trust. It's funded through the EU Urban Innovation Action Fund, and we're striving to put nature at the heart of decision making across the city and inspire a new wave of nature-based solutions. So we're trying to challenge our existing attitudes and our behaviours towards nature, how we engage with green and blue spaces, how we think about the natural world, and also how we work with nature. And the project's aiming to inspire people, communities, businesses and organisations to provide more opportunities for people to get involved and use science and creativity to make nature exciting and visible and create a really great buzz of activity and excitement around Plymouth. So here at the National Trust, our ranger team are split across 2 sites at Saltram and Plymbridge. And between us all, we really want to share our work, our knowledge, our passion, and provide engagement opportunities and really help the partnership achieve its goal of greening the city and helping more people to interact more. We've also got funds to invest at Saltram. So we will be expanding an orchard. We're lucky here we've had an orchard for many generations. Kieran, one of our rangers, will talk about that later. But we'd really like to expand this priority habitat and work with the community to plant and care for it for the future. We're also planning on softening the old road area of the estate as a corridor for nature. And sort of being a bit of a shop window of actually, if you leave nature to do its thing, what it may or may not look like. And we're also going to be doing a feasibility study of the Dell to see what we can do to improve access and increase the natural value for people and wildlife. So watch out for those over the next coming couple of years. But that's all I wanted to say for now, and we'll move on to the sort of main feast. So I'll whisk you into the capable hands of our ranger team. They've got an absolute treasure trove of experience and exciting topics to talk about this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Chris.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Chris. I'm one of the rangers at National Trust Plymbridge Woods, and I'm here to speak to you about some of the work we do at Plymbridge. This isn't going to be, our job here is so varied week to week. It's not going to be an exhaustive list by any kind of means, but it covers a good range of the tasks and the projects that we get up to. And then Jamie and Luke will go into some other aspects of our jobs in a bit more detail later on. So first off, I'm going to speak a bit about ecological surveying. So these are the surveys we carry out on the plants and the animals around the site. So why do we survey? Surveying gives us a chance to see how our management of the site is improving the habitats that we look after. So we can use surveying to help quantify that. As the years go by, we'd help to see an increase in the number of different species that we find. And it's also a chance to find if we have any rare or interesting species on site that may affect how we manage different areas. So we survey for plants through the wildflower meadows. We've got 5 different wildflower meadows spread throughout the site that we survey each June. This is with our volunteers that we go out with, and we've so far found up to 60 different species in some of the meadows, so it's really good habitat. It's priority action plan habitat for lowland meadows, so it's really nice little areas of wildflowers that we've got now. We also survey for birds around the site. Our volunteers go out surveying different areas of woodland each year to monitor how the woodland management that we carry out affects the different numbers of birds that we see. And we also keep a record of all the birds that we found at Plymbridge over the years, which we're currently on 62 different species, which includes kingfishers, siskins, woodpeckers, and goshawks. We also survey for moths during the summer months. We've got some really enthusiastic volunteers who survey every couple of weeks for us from about dusk onwards in the car parks around and in a few other places. And they found so far 174 different moth species, which is fantastic numbers to hear. And we've got bat boxes that we've put through around the site. We put these up in collaboration with Devon Bat Group. These get checked every year by the volunteers as well. And we found loads of different bats in these. We found noctules, we found pipistrelles, we found lesser horseshoe bats and Dorbenton's bats. So loads of stuff going on there, which is great to hear. Next up, I'm going to speak a bit about woodland management. Being a predominantly wooded site, we're lucky enough to spend a lot of the time through the winter months on woodland management projects. So first off, I'm going to speak about tree safety management, and this takes up quite a lot of our time during the winter. We have to ensure that any trees that are near any paths or busy areas or houses are safe. There aren't any bits that are going to fall on people or damage anything or things like that. So for these trees, we survey them in depth between 1 to 3 years, depending on how busy the sites are. We're currently in the middle of an epidemic of ash dieback, which is a fungal disease that affects ash trees. It's becoming quite serious in the last couple of years to a point that it's infecting and killing up to 90% of ash trees around Europe. So it's quite serious stuff. The disease causes the timber of the trees to become very brittle. So it often isn't safe to leave any dead trees or dying trees near any busy areas. So we normally do have to take those out quite soon. But wherever we can, we leave older trees from other species around the site standing as long as we possibly can, because these are excellent habitat for invertebrates, for birds, for bats and lichens and things like that. Next up, I'm going to speak a bit about habitat management. So a lot of woodland management is all about managing light levels during on the woodland floor. So a lot of our site is PAWS woodland, which stands for Plantation on Ancient Woodland Site. So hundreds and hundreds of years ago was woodland, and sometime between then and now it's been cut down and replanted with something else. So a lot of ours was replanted with oak around 100 years ago for coppice. And since then, it's been almost left unmanaged in some areas for many, many years, which results in loads of trees around, but they're all exactly the same age, they're exactly the same height, they're the same species, and it's not a very diverse habitat. Because they're all the same age with the same size canopy, the heavy shade that comes from this stops a lot of other plants from growing up below. This means that there are fewer wildflowers underneath, there are less shrubby areas for birds to nest in, and there's less new tree saplings growing up to replace the older ones as they die. So what we're essentially trying to do with our work is to create a larger variety of habitats through the woods. So by felling out a clump of trees within this, we can create what's called a glade, which is a big open space within the woods. Over time, this would then fill up with wildflowers, which would grow up from the seeds that are in the soil, which would scrub over time, and then eventually new trees would be able to grow up through this and fill out the hole left in the tree canopy. This picture here on the left shows a glade we created a few years ago. In the middle here, you can see we've created what's called a monolith. This is where you take a tree and you cut just about all of the canopy off and all the big branches, leaving just about nothing but the stem left. This, as well as letting in loads more light to the forest floor, it also leaves a really good amount of standing deadwood, which is really important habitat for things like woodpeckers, for example, would then choose to nest in something like this in the middle of the wood in the forest. While we're doing this, you can see here one of our rangers working on this tree. As we go up and down, we can also carve out bird boxes and bat boxes into the trunk to give a bit more wildlife habitat as well. Along with light levels, another issue in our woodlands are the numbers of deer. So there aren't any natural predators for deer in this country, so the deer levels are much, much higher than they would be otherwise. When you get deer numbers that are as high as they are at Plymbridge, they can eat so much vegetation that they can halt the natural progress of an open area, turning back into woodland. So the wildflowers and the tree saplings that can manage to grow up will just be nibbled down to nothing each year by the deer coming through, and nothing can grow high enough to escape this cycle then. So to counter this, we try and exclude deer from certain areas throughout the woods. So sometimes we can fence off areas with tall wire fencing to keep the deer out, but often we can use the timber around us to try and help do this as well. So in this middle picture here, one of our volunteers is creating what we call a dead hedge. So this is where we neatly stack all the brash, which is all the branches from the trees that we've fallen, to create a high wall which can keep deer out of small areas. This gives the plants within these areas a chance to start growing again away from the grazing pressure from the deer, and the dead hedge will instantly provide some cover for ground nesting birds as well. And now I'm going to talk about sustainable timber use as well. So the majority of the wood that we take from, or that we cut down in the forest, we tend to leave right where it is, because dead wood is a really important part of woodland ecosystems. And in general, too much has been taken out of a lot of woodlands over the last few decades. So as much as we can, we leave loads in there. But for some of the timber, we can make really good use out of it if we can get it out easily, especially the nice straight bits of oak that we take out, which a lot of our woodland is. Oak wood is strong and it's naturally really durable as well, without having to treat it with any kind of chemical preservatives. So it's a great choice for some rural construction work on site. Smaller diameter trees we can split down or use whole as posts for fencing around the site, which looks much more appealing than treated softwood posts shipped in from elsewhere and can last just as long, if not longer, than these other softwood options. The larger timber we can mill up into thick boards, and we can use these boards to build picnic benches that we install around the site, like you'd see on the far right here. So by using timber that we've sourced from our own site, we're helping to lower our carbon footprint and reduce our reliance from importing wood that's full of chemicals from elsewhere in the world. So that's been a bit of a quick run through of some of the tasks we undertake as part of our normal job, but there are of course loads of other jobs and projects that we get stuck into throughout the year. Things like footpath maintenance, fencing, grass cutting, litter picking, running events, and loads more. But none of the stuff that we do would be possible without our team of volunteers. We've currently got around 30 active volunteers who come in with us, and they do everything from litter picking, surveying, and practical work in the woods every week. But during the peregrine project season, we can have as many as 70 volunteers that give up their time to come in and help make Plymbridge the clean, welcoming, and nature-rich place that it is. So with that in mind, I'll end my part of this presentation with a big thank you to all of our volunteers who've been able to come back since lockdown restrictions ended. And fingers crossed we can welcome everyone else back very soon as well. So thank you very much for listening. And I will pass you over to Luke, our current immersive volunteer, who's going to talk a little bit more about what he's been up to since he's been volunteering with us. Thanks very much.
Hi, hello everyone. So my name's Luke, and I've been the immersive volunteer at the Plymbridge Wood site for the past 12 months. I first came to Plymouth to study conservation biology, and I've stayed around ever since graduating 3 years ago. I first met the Plym Valley Ranger team when I was volunteering with their fantastic peregrine project that they do. So it's an awareness project for the peregrine falcons. And shortly after, I was successful in joining the team as their immersive volunteer. So what is an immersive volunteer? The immersive volunteer post is a 6 to 12 month trainee placement, working as part of the ranger team, giving excellent nature-based experience and skills in the job. I love the fact that each day in the woods is completely different. The post offers a variety of different responsibilities, such as assisting with volunteer management, helping carrying out surveys of our woodland and meadow habitats, engaging with our visitors, and helping keep our beautiful woodland site maintained and safe for everyone who enjoys it. I found that this position has been an excellent opportunity to build on the theory I've learned through my studies and apply it to a real life setting. It's amazing how many unexpected problems you encounter when you're actually trying to carry out a task which seems very simple on paper. One of my favourite parts of being an immersive volunteer is being able to work out in nature each day. There are so many great opportunities to further my plant and animal knowledge. And I definitely feel I've increased my ID skills tenfold since starting the post. Although I've also learned that you have to be very cautious, even if you can ID a mushroom, you have to be very certain you know the correct cooking instructions. If you're eating honey fungus, it's very delicious, but make sure you are cooking it thoroughly. That's my little bit of knowledge I'm going to impart on you. I also absolutely love working with volunteer groups. There's so much experience and so much skill there, and amazing life stories you can gain from it. So it's a really, really rewarding experience, just meeting all these different people. And it's lots of like-minded people as well. I would highly recommend this post to anyone who wants to further their knowledge on the incredible world around us, while at the same time making amazing connections with like-minded people and learning a vast array of practical skills such as fencing, carpentry, and habitat creation. As Chris mentioned earlier, there's a lot going on at the site. This is an excellent position for anyone who wants to pursue a career in nature conservation. And yeah, as I said before, just get some really good experience in working a job in this career. At the moment, I'm actually working with the Green Minds project as well. So I'm doing a project in Central Park at the moment. So we're looking at the old Zoofield site, and it's a site which used to be a zoo, hence the name. And they're trying to introduce a little bit more biodiversity into the site. And I'm representing the National Trust as part of the team, who are just looking at the site, realizing what's there at the moment, what we can work with, what species we'd like to encourage, and just looking at how the land is and what kind of features we can add to it, or just improve. It's really nice to get some input from the community as well. So quite a lot of it is community engagement, and it would be really nice to hear what you guys would like this Zoofield site to kind of have as well. What species you'd like to see. At the moment, it's really talking to the people who are walking through it, people who are enjoying it, and seeing how you would like to improve it as well. So it's not just us that are working on it. So if you have any questions about what you'd like to see in the Zoofield or any ideas, please feel free to answer any in the, or pose any in the comment section. That's a very brief summary of what the role is as an immersive volunteer at the National Trust in Plymbridge Woods. I'm going to pass you on to Jamie now, who's going to talk a little bit more in depth about our peregrine project and some other things. So Jamie.
Hello everyone, I'm Jamie and I'm one of the rangers here at National Trust Plymbridge Woods. Following on from Luke, I'll be talking about our Plymouth peregrine project, which is, actually it's just crashed. Oh, that's frustrating. Sorry, 2 seconds guys, got a bit of a technical issue. Help Ellie, possibly. Thank you very much. The PowerPoint just crashed, unfortunately, and it's restarting. Just wanting to restart. Anyway, I'm just going to talk over without the presentation, unfortunately. So, following on from Luke, I'll be talking about our Plymouth Peregrine project, which is actually celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, which is fantastic. Along with how some of our volunteers help to manage this special place. So, we're incredibly lucky to have peregrines nesting here at Plymbridge. These incredibly charismatic birds thrive in Canquoy for over 50 years now. These large and impressive falcons have dark blue and grey plumage with white underparts with delicate barring over the lower chest, which unfortunately you can't make out in this video just now, but we'll make this available afterwards. The female is much larger than the male, who's actually a third of her size, which is very apparent when they're sat by side. So what do they eat and how do they catch it? So their main prey source are pigeons. However, they're known to take smaller birds such as blackbirds and even woodpeckers on occasion. Now, peregrines on the wing, either in a straight chase or by soaring to a great height and performing a dramatic free-fall attack onto their prey called a stoop, in which they can reach speeds of up to 200 miles an hour, making them the fastest bird on the planet. Due to their fondness for carrier pigeons, in World War II they were persecuted and their population did decline. However, they were hit much harder in the 1950s when the population collapsed due to the pesticide DDT. The chemical built up in the food chain, leading to egg thinning, unfortunately, which led to high mortality rates in chicks across the country. So why are we here then? So the Plymouth Peregrine project began in 2001, following the deliberate poisoning attempt in 1999 and a successful poisoning of a nesting female and her chicks in the year 2000. We're pleased to say, though, that the efforts of staff and volunteers weren't in vain, with the project witnessing over 50 chicks successfully fledging in our 20-year period. So the project now runs as an important engagement hub for us here on site, where the story of the birds is told through telescopes by our passionate volunteers, inspiring people to connect with the natural world around them. So where do they call home? The natural nesting habitat for peregrines includes quarry faces and cliff edges, but they're often found nesting on top of tall buildings such as cathedrals in cities. However, the most important environmental factor for peregrines is the availability of sustainable prey, which we have in abundance here. So this year, our local birds have decided to nest on a scrape a few meters to the left of last year's nest, which is visible from Can Viaduct along Route 27. So there are some photos on our National Trust Plymbridge Woods Facebook page which highlight the actual nest site, which should help you should you wish to come and visit the birds. So what's happening now? So both parents have been taking it in turns recently to incubate their eggs over a 4-week period. This year, the eggs hatch around the 6th of May, meaning we're likely to see fledging over the next couple of weeks. This is a crucial period for both chicks and parents, with plenty of feeding happening around the clock as the birds develop rapidly. So over the next few weeks, the chicks will grow into their adult plumage, explore their surroundings. Looking ahead, when the chicks have successfully left the nest, they'll start to explore the quarry from the ear, which is often met with varying levels of success. So as the chicks gain confidence, it's time for their training to begin. So the adults will drop through from great heights to teach the young how to hunt in spectacular aerial displays, which is incredible to watch. So head down to the first viaduct along Route 27 from our car park for a chance to see these incredible predators thriving in their natural habitat. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the project has run without volunteers for a second season. However, the platform is up and we do welcome you to come and view the birds from there. Please do adhere to social distancing guidelines though, as displayed on the viaduct, and please be mindful of others during your visit. So I'm just going to pause for a second whilst we sort out this technical glitch. Hopefully this might have rectified it. Oh.
We're getting there.
We're getting there, guys. Sorry, thanks for hanging on in there. So fantastic. This is some footage actually from a previous slide that I've just ran through. It's about the chicks. So this is what you can see up on the viaduct at the moment. We've got 3 chicks that are being fed around the clock, and this is the kind of scene that you will be able to see from a telescope. But if you bring a decent pair of binoculars, you're likely to see a similar kind of scene. So I'm going to move on. These are some other fantastic aerial photos of the aerial displays that I was talking about earlier. And we'll move on to our next subject. It's practical volunteering. So we're incredibly grateful for the dedication shown by our volunteers each week here at Plymbridge. For those of you who are tuning in, you're an integral part of our team here, and we value your time and commitment immensely. I'm just going to try and play this video. So, in this video, we took the Green Minds approach by working across boundaries with nature at the forefront, helping to clear a wet flush from an area of land owned by Plymouth City Council recently. By the end of the day, we felt a special connection to this spot. Feeling inspired, we sat and we listened in the safe in the knowledge that nature was slowly reclaiming this special place. Also got another video here, which may or may not work. It's not going to work that one. I'm going to pause that. Sorry, guys. There's another video here, which you can actually see on our Facebook page. It's actually a video of our green woodworking. We're also all about sustainability here at Plymbridge, which is what Chris mentioned earlier. In the video that you can find on our Facebook page, our Tuesday volunteers actually utilise sections of oak, which is a byproduct of our woodland management plan here at Plymbridge, to create a new gate corral. So this method involves no man-made fixings apart from the gate hinges themselves. So with rural skills in decline at the moment, we feel it's important to integrate them into our day-to-day, learning together and passing them on for future generations. We're also currently in the process of making our own Plymbridge Woods gates too, so keep an eye out for those on site soon. And here we go. Okay, so as I'm sure you're becoming aware, there are no 2 days the same when caring for a site such as Plymbridge. A lot of our work here is seasonal, from meadow management in the summer months to the winter habitat management programme, which Chris touched on earlier, along with ongoing site maintenance and repair. It's all equally important to us. Our volunteer teams have been hard at work recently using sympathetic dead hedging techniques to relieve recreational pressures on site, a process which is already helping to rewild and conserve vital habitat so that nature can regenerate quietly in the background. Skill days like these are a great way for us to shout about the great conservation work we're carrying out. If you do spot us out in the woods, feel free to come and have a chat. but we feel it's really important to communicate the work that we do to help people understand and get on board with the way that we manage Plymbridge. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry about the technical difficulties for this part. I'll now pass you on to our lead ranger, Doug Munford, who will be discussing the balance between access and recreation.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Excellent example of Darwin's survival and ability to survive through adaptability there. Well done. Yeah, so my name is Doug Munford. I'm the lead ranger for Saltram Bridge, and I've just come to talk a little bit about striking a balance between access and conservation, particularly looking at it's always good to start with a quote, especially a quote from someone who is far more intelligent than me. So I've chosen one from Octavia Hill, who's one of the founders of the National Trust, 1888. And I think, especially given the past year and a half, this comment rings true today as much as it did then. So a little bit on the background of Saltram. So last year, 2020, we had 772,000 visits. A normal year would have seen those visits pass 1 million. In 2019, we had somewhere in the region of 910,000 visits. And Plymbridge Woods had 365,000 visits in 2020. There's a growth of about 70,000 visits just at Saltram, which puts quite a lot of pressure on our infrastructure, paths, fencing, bird hides that you can see there, all sorts really. And it puts pressure on the nature that uses Saltram Bridge as a little oasis in the urban setting. We find ourselves facing some challenges as a consequence of this, so a little bit of decrease in quality of habitat. The rise in numbers of people usually leads to a loss of habitat. We've had recently our priority habitat assessments across all national trust properties in the southwest, and majority of Saltram was in poor and moderate condition in the areas that are open to the public, moderate to good in areas where public are excluded. This is caused by many things, one of which is dogs. So disturbance radius of a dog is around 10 meters. So if you imagine each dog has got a 20-meter hoop over their head and they go running off through the woodland, they're disturbing ground nesting birds and everything else. They'll stay away from if they're nesting, they'll stay, depending on the species, they'll stay away from the nest. That can affect the success rate of modern farming practices intensified over the past 50, 60 years as well. Increased number of deer, Chris has already touched on that and its effect. Also historical management. So if you take Saltram as an example, there's a gap in parkland planting between about 1850 and 1950, thereabouts. So we've got very old trees and we've got very young trees and not much in between. So there will be, unfortunately, a bit of a gap. Woodlands perhaps have been managed for aesthetic rather than their timber rather than for ecology, making the approach generally being making the parkland look a little bit tidier than perhaps we might want it now. So you may have noticed, if you're a regular visitor to Saltram and Plymbridge, increase in dead trees being left in the parkland and throughout the woodland. But fear not, it's not all doom and gloom. We've been busily working away for a number of years now with a number of strategies and supports from external places. So within the Trust, we've got the Land Outdoors and Nature strategy, which aims to restore or create about 25,000 hectares of new wildlife habitats on existing National Trust land in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. For us, Saltram and Plymbridge, what that means is improving what we already have through improved management techniques, as already been touched on, leaving a lot of deadwood in woodlands, creating habitat like Chris was talking about with veteranizing trees, changing approaches to how we manage our farmland through different grazing practices. We've also got Green Minds funding, which is EU funding with an aim to engage people with nature while supporting nature's recovery and creation. So as already touched on, we've got the Dell. We're looking at restoring the Dell here at Saltram, expanding the orchard and also softening the old road. So take softening the old road as an example. What we're doing there is almost kind of being a shop window for what we're doing on a landscape scale at other properties in the country. So we know that we've got these two little woodland blocks which are planted as shelter belt planting alongside the A38, and there's a bit of a gap. And from our bat surveys, we know that bats don't like crossing this gap. So what we're doing is we're just taking back a little bit of the field, fencing it out, and we're going to plant a few trees in there to give it a little bit of a turbo boost. But we're going to be surveying that in the coming years, seeing what pops up, and hopefully that will create a little corridor to join up those two woodland gaps so the bats can traverse the estate a lot more easily. We also got the Green Recovery Challenge Fund, which is government funding with aims to restore and create jobs in the green sector, also improving spaces for nature. So for us, this means that we've got a little pot of money to do some big things over at Plymbridge in terms of our woodland management. But again, it's about turbo boosting. How can we maximise the funds that we have to improve our spaces for nature and also access for people to them? It's all about balance. Balance is key. Coming back to the quote from Octavia Hill, Trust is committed to providing green open spaces for everyone. While we would relish the opportunity to allow open space, open access to all of our properties, there are often areas where we need to make space for nature. This can be from the extreme, so take Plymouth peregrine nesting site, which is a scheduled area protected by law, all the way down to the slight, which can be a little sign on a gate saying, please put your dogs on the lead in it. We need to weigh up decisions when we're talking about access versus conservation and make pragmatic decisions and compromises. So if we look at Blackstone Meadow, Luke's going to come on in a second, talk about this in much more detail, but I'm just going to touch on it. So the pathway that you can see between Blackstone Meadow itself and the River Plym, the estuary there, the pathway was in very poor condition. So we made the decision from a health and safety point of view to shut that path. But in doing so, we also had a feeling that we could improve that site for nature. So we started, before we shut the site, we started surveying with help from many of our wonderful bird volunteers. And the figures have, far exceeded our expectations, really. I won't steal Luke's thunder, I'll leave that for him. Here we can see the red line is closed. The green line is still permissible access, obviously on our riverside walk there. So we haven't really restricted access. You can still gain access and enjoyment of that space, but just from one side versus both. And the gains for nature, really support that. But we can't do any of this without our wonderful people that we engage with in our spaces. So to maintain these spaces, we need our supporters. Be that support financially by buying a cup of tea, membership, leaving a legacy, a will, or volunteering their time and coming to help support us. We need you and yours to come and enjoy this space, and in doing so, just simply by being here, you're helping us deliver in our objectives, keeping this beautiful green space, not only for nature, but for people, forever and for everyone. I'm going to pass over to Luke now. Thank you very much.
Right. Hello. Thanks, Doug. My name's Luke. I'm one of the rangers here at Saltram, and I'm lucky enough to look after Blackstone Meadow, which you can see on your screens now. Blackstone Meadow, what is it? It's basically a tidal mudflat salt marsh. So it's based on the River Plym. As the tide floods up the River Plym, it comes across through the sluice gates, which I'll talk a bit more about later, and across the marsh, creating basically another extension of the mudflats that we see on the Plym. But the difference between Blackstone Meadow and the Plym mudflats is that it's protected by a big sea wall. This provides a key habitat, and it's now been recognised as a priority habitat by the Trust, which is great news. So Blackstone Meadow didn't always look like this. Blackstone Meadow used to be just a field. It was walled off back in the 1900s and was just grazed. So there was livestock on there, big fences around the outside, and it was just grassland. So back in the late 90s, we came up with a project to try and reintroduce a salt marsh on the estate. We noticed that across the southwest and across the UK nationally, there is a shortage in salt marshes and intertidal zones. So it was a great project to try and encourage more nature onto the estate. So what happened is that we partnered with the Environment Agency, and we decided to breach the seawall and create a spillway. Now, a spillway is basically a one-way, technically it's two-way. Basically, it's a tube. It's a tube in a wall, and it allows water to flow through the wall, and then it will flow out with every tide. So it floods with every tide, which is what we want, and doesn't let too much water in so that the estate doesn't get flooded, but lets in just enough water in so that just the marsh area gets flooded. And depending on the different tides, depending on the amount of levels of water we get on the site, which means that certain vegetation plants can start to appear and thrive in the habitat. So what do we do? This is what it looks like now. You can see in the picture on the right. It's developed drastically since the seawall was breached and the spillway was added. Ever since we closed off the boundary path around the edge of the seawall, or around the edge of Blackstone Meadow, we have seen a massive increase in species diversity and in numbers. But we still have to maintain Blackstone Meadow, so we keep an eye out on the site. So we have a fantastic group of volunteers who are made up from existing volunteers and keen, passionate members. And they keep an eye on the site, doing regular surveys, checking on numbers and diversities. And so we are easily able to track our management on what we do on the site and be able to have interactions with the site through changes, or keep our hands in our pockets and just let it develop naturally, which is my preferred route. So on the right, on the left, you can see one of my colleagues cutting what we call breaks along the seawall. So if you go along in winter, you might be able to see half a dozen of these strips of bare earth or cut grass up the seawall. This creates a mosaic habitat along the back of the seawall, which is great for wildflowers, vertebrates, and also our small nesting birds, which we're starting to get along there. We also have started to introduce and repair perch posts on the meadow. So this is these little N-shaped posts and rails that you can see, and that provides more roosting habitat for larger birds such as greater black-backed gulls and things like that. So here we go. Look, you can see it in a bit more detail now. There's the perch posts, and we also have these islands that are on the marsh. These were created back when the spillway was put in by the Environment Agency, and these are fantastic habitats for many of our species. You can tend to find little egrets sat up on them in good numbers, which is brilliant. We also have otters that have started to visit the site ever since we've closed off the seawall, which has been a huge success for us. We were walking on there one day and noticed some poo. They decided to put some trail cameras out, and lo and behold, we managed to capture some of these shots. This was a huge success for the team. We all really chuffed with ourselves, and just proves the point that you can balance nature and. So, what else have we been seeing on the meadow now? So ever since the seawall was closed off to public, we have seen an increase. That was back in 2017, so 2020, yeah, 2021 now, isn't it? And we've seen an increase in species, not only in diversity, but in population numbers. So you can see on the bottom left, there is a bird called the black-headed gull. It's a common bird, so you'll see it pretty much every day down on the marsh. But we used to see numbers of around 50 to 100 during winter, and that was a good day when the seawall was open to the public. But now, with all the management that we've been doing on the site, we have seen the species go up to around 400 to 500, and that's just every day. So it's a huge increase, and we've been seeing this increase in all the other species across the site. So that includes things like the curlew, which is a declining species nationally, and we've seen increases in the population here at Saltram, which is brilliant. We're also starting to see some indicator species come in, such as the goosander and the kingfisher, seen in the two images on the top right here. These are birds that specialize in hunting small fry fish. And so seeing those on the site, seeing them regularly on the site, means that we have a very diverse habitat, not only in bird numbers, but all the way through the ecosystem and the food chain, which is great. And that's what we want to see. So that is Blackstone Meadow. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will now pass you on to Kieran, who's going to talk about the orchard here at Saltram.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. I'm Kieran. I work as an assistant ranger at Saltram, and I'm going to talk about our orchard, touching on its history, management, and the wildlife that it supports. So we know that in 1638, Saltram was described as having 2 acres of orchard, and from historical OS maps like the one on screen at the moment, we know that the orchard was still in existence up until at least 1938. From this date on, we're a little foggier as to what the original orchard's fate was. It's likely, however, that at some point after the Second World War, it was either lost to neglect or grubbed out as Britain transitioned to intensive agriculture and our focus shifted to commercially grown fruit varieties in more modern commercial orchards. This same story played out across the country, as 90% of traditional orchards have either been lost to neglect or destroyed since 1950. When managed traditionally, orchards are fantastic for both people and wildlife, providing an essential food source for local communities, whilst also being home to a wide array of wildlife. In contrast, many modern commercial orchards can have a negative impact on biodiversity, due to the trees being regularly replaced, the use of chemical pesticides, and the grass being mown close to the ground. However, in recent decades, there has been an increased effort to restore and conserve Britain's lost orchards. And in 2005, the team at Saltram did just that by replanting the former orchard site with 57 new fruit trees, including apples, pears, and plums. This was followed up by a second round of planting in late 2019 of a further 35 trees. The fruit trees are mostly heritage varieties from the southwest. This is important to us because it means that we're helping to conserve varieties that have been cultivated locally for hundreds of years. Many of these varieties were on the verge of extinction before apple enthusiasts took cuttings from mature trees in the last remaining old orchards to grow on the next generation. Practically, it also means that the trees are well suited for the southwest damp but warm growing environment. We're all familiar with the bright, shiny apples you can buy in supermarkets without any imperfections. The heritage varieties, on the other hand, can be a bit rougher around the edges, but come with lots of character, flavour, and some wonderful names, such as Pig Snout, Plimpton Pippin, and Fair Maid of Devon. So the orchard is managed by our ranger team and orchard volunteer group. The orchard volunteers come in once a month and carry out all sorts of jobs, depending on the time of year and what projects we've got on the go. Recently, we've been constructing tree guards, planting new fruit trees, mulching and weeding around new plantings, doing the winter pruning and stacking up brush piles. And of course, the best time of year is the apple harvest, when we all get together and spend a great day clambering up trees, shaking branches, and quality testing lots of the apples. We've got a bit of a there we go, that's what we're after. So, Saltram's orchard produces plenty of fruit every year. And most of the apples that we pick I used to make Hello? Sorry about that, just a slight technical hitch. So I'm just going to start this slide over again. So Saltram's orchard produces plenty of fruit every year, and most of the apples that we pick are used to make Saltram cider. The rest are either turned into apple juice, eaten by the team, or left on the trees as a food source for birds and insects. It's clear that orchards provide a lot for people, but they are also a vital habitat for all sorts of wildlife. Traditional orchards form what is called a mosaic habitat. This means they contain elements of other habitats often found in isolation, such as grassland, wildflower meadow, scrub, hedgerow, and woodland. All these habitats are valuable on their own, but when combined, it helps to provide a haven for all sorts of species. One of the key elements of an orchard in terms of biodiversity is dead and decaying wood. Our orchard is still relatively young, so the fruit trees don't have much decay. We are lucky, however, to have some veteran oak and ash trees in and around the orchard. These trees, full of decaying wood, hollow sections, cracks and holes in the bark, are an incredibly important habitat for bats, birds, small mammals, fungi, and a whole range of invertebrates. To help contribute further to the amount of deadwood, all of our cuttings from the pruning season are piled up and left to rot down. Attracting pollinators is key to the success of every orchard and of great importance in terms of nature conservation. So we manage our hedgerows, grassland, and wildflower meadows with this in mind. Every spring, when our fruit trees burst into blossom, they need to be pollinated so they can produce fruit later in the year. This essential task is carried out by our pollinating insects, a diverse group of bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, and hoverflies. When trying to attract and conserve pollinators, it's important that you have the longest flowering periods possible, so that there is a long-lasting source of nectar. For instance, when planning the orchard, we made sure that the flowering times of the different trees were varied, so not all the trees burst into blossom at once. A recent example of what we've been doing to help attract pollinators is our management of a bank at the rear of the orchard. A few years ago, the bank was covered in young elm trees suffering from Dutch elm disease. Elms spread by suckering from the roots, which forms a dense cover, resulting in not much light getting to the ground and very few wildflowers. The team cleared the bank back in 2018, and now every spring it bursts into colour, with bluebells, red campion, oxeye daisies, foxgloves, buttercups, knapweed, and lots more. From spring until late summer, the bank is now buzzing with all sorts of insect life. We now manage it by cutting the vegetation back every couple of years and removing the clippings. Saltram's involvement with the Green Minds project means that moving forward, we can deliver on some more great projects, including the further expansion of our orchard. Our involvement with the partnership means that we can learn from others and share our knowledge to help nature thrive in Plymouth. And now over to Becky, who I think might have some questions for us.
That was great. Thank you to all of you. And also well done for getting through some of those technical hitches. You've done a great job. So hopefully you can hear me if Ellie gives me the thumbs up. Or Kieran, why are you there? Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me. So I'm going to go through some questions now. Thanks for sending them in. You can send in a couple more. I think we've got, thank you, you can hear me. That's brilliant. Thank you. So we're ready to go? So we've got a few questions here. So the first one I've got for Luke. So that's Luke from Saltram, if you could pop over. So we are trying to stay socially distant and so they are swapping chairs. So
right.
How that goes.
Hello.
So Luke, could you tell us a little bit more about Blackstone and some of the sightings that we've seen this year, and has that changed with climate change?
Yeah, so some of the sightings we've seen this year, we've had red pitchard, and that's probably, we had a Ross's gull, which was really good. And so we've also been seeing some more other exciting species, not necessarily this year, but late last year we had things like avocets and spoonbills come through, which was really good. They only stop off for sort of 2-3 days as they move further up to their breeding sites up country. As regards to sort of climate change, the impacts of that, we've definitely seen impacts in the birds arriving later, staying longer, and things like that. And that's just probably due to warmer climates elsewhere, delaying them to move through. And you could sort of think that regards to sea levels and things like that. So our concern with that really is that there'll be too much water flooding onto the marsh at some point. And how we're going to manage that is something that we are still debating. So yeah, that's all that we can say on that really.
Brilliant, thank you, Luke. So I'm going to swap to the other Luke now. And we'd really like to know what advice you would give to anyone who's considering volunteering in conservation, whether that's an immersive role like yours or in general, really, just joining the team as a volunteer. What advice would you give?
Hello. My main advice would be just to do it. It's a fantastic opportunity, and it's really rewarding. As I said before, you've heard all the benefits, and from my point of view, the best way to find volunteer positions and everything is to look on the National Trust website. When they're volunteering, when they have positions available, they tend to advertise. And yeah, no, it's amazing. I would very highly recommend it. And as the ranger team have said, it's really beneficial to the site's maintenance and just making sure the biodiversity is really flourishing. Yeah, keep an eye out on the website, and that's the best.
Thank you. And I think Green Minds should bring some more opportunities as well. Did you have to bring any sort of specific skills, or do you think people could just come along and learn sort of from the outset if they just got sort of a more basic interest?
I think the main key thing with volunteering is it's really accepting everyone, really. It's an excellent opportunity to build skills. So at Plymbridge Woods, it's really giving people an opportunity to learn how to conserve things, to learn all these practical things like the green woodworking, carpentry, all this dead hedging and everything like that. So and that's the main benefit of the volunteering. As far as the Green Minds project, as far as I've gone, it's been very helpful approaching this project with a year's experience of volunteering with the National Trust behind me, because it's given me so much experience in ID skills and in really designing areas to promote biodiversity. So as far as the Green Minds project, I found it's really good going into it with this this year of volunteering behind me. But yeah, I think if you're going to do general volunteering, it's a very nice experience to build on these skills. So I wouldn't say you need anything in particular.
That's great. Thank you, Luke. I won't put you on the spot any longer. So we're going to go over to Doug next, please.
Hello.
So as part of future plans, are there any other areas that you think you're going to need to restrict access to or temporarily sort of close off so that they can regenerate? Is there plans for that, do you know, at the moment?
Potentially looking at the future of Saltram, there's areas that we may want to temporarily restrict access to, but I think it's more important to think in it as not so much restricting as redirecting. If you take the example of the meadows at Plymbridge Woods, we've got two meadows right next to each other. One was really ecologically strong, had lots of orchids in there and was doing really well. The one next to it, not so much. So we as a team made the decision to manage one of those for amenity with lots of regular cutting, provide people with that open space that they clearly wanted for, you know, playing with families, walking dogs, things like that. And the more ecologically diverse meadow we managed for ecology. And by making one area better for amenity, football, etc., that drew the people out of the area where we're trying to improve conservation value. So it's not always fences and dead hedges and things like that, although we do use them with great effect. I think in terms of marginal gains, which is a cycling term, but it's little and often all over the place, which soon builds up to create a bigger, better picture for nature with it. So yeah, don't think restricting, think redirecting. That's what I think.
Thank you. So stay where you are, Doug, because we've got a couple more questions. So one is about managing woodland. So are there different ways to manage the woodland, and does it depend on the type? And is it a relatively new practice, or is it something that has sort of always been happening and it's now just using sort of modern methods? Or just tell us a little bit about the types of woodland and how long these practices have been going for.
Well, managing woodland, I guess we've been managing woodland since the dawn of history in one way or another, be it clearing it to create better, space for farmland, or we're like Plymbridge Woods, replanted for charcoal production primarily, but also would have been something related to shipbuilding. Uses and purposes of our land change, and woodlands, for many people have been thought of as a crop. You know, you might be growing it for timber production. You think about your softwood plantations all over the country, all over the world. That's what they're doing there. So there's many ways of managing a woodland. Depends what you're trying to do. If it's, you know, a coppice, you're trying to grow pea sticks to create a product that you can then sell. We, as an organisation and at Saltram and Plymbridge, I think it's fair to say that we do a little bit of all of these things. So coppicing, it's an engagement tool for our neighbours, and it's also about keeping those traditional crafts and skills alive. But also there are many organisms that rely on those habitats. They've evolved over, because these practices of woodland management are going for hundreds of years. There are specific creatures that thrive in that particular habitat. But yeah, so for us, it's taking an approach to each woodland, linking back to Chris talking about his surveying, find out what's there, what could be there, and how can we manage it best for those things, while balancing that with the needs of the people who are ultimately supporting our core purpose with their time and money, and making sure they've got access to them.
Great, and I'm going to keep you sat there as well, Doug. We've been asked whether long-term grazing for habitat management, is that an option that would be explored more than is already being used, or is that not something that works for the site, either at Saltram or Plymbridge?
Yeah, grazing, both at Plymbridge and Saltram, they're two very different sites. The grazing is a tricky one, especially when you have large numbers of people. Historically, Saltram has a history of being grazed with livestock. It's a farm, essentially. How we use that is working with our farm tenants, so that we can get that balance. It's not just access and conservation, it's also production and conservation. So we need to work with our farm tenants and bring them into the fold and get them on board, which usually isn't very hard, about what we're trying to achieve, so that we can achieve both our goals. And in terms of how you use that grazing, it depends what you're trying to achieve, and it can be quite a finely tuned a process, really. You know, if you're talking about, I want a stocking density of 0.6 animals per hectare per year versus 0.8 animals per hectare per year, the results you're going to get from those two are completely different. So one will allow for regeneration of scrubby areas and hawthorn and blackthorn and things like that, which is great for your ground nesting birds, and the other one, the 0.8, you're going to get much less regeneration, but it depends what you're managing the site for.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. So we've just got one more question left, and that's for Luke. If he's able to come back on to talk about Blackstone Meadow again. So basically, we want to know how people can get involved with surveying and monitoring of the birds at the salt marsh. Is that an opportunity that's available at the moment? Is it something you're looking to develop? Can you tell us more about getting involved?
Yeah, so volunteering, we take volunteers from members of the public and internal volunteers, just anybody who's got a passion really for Blackstone Meadow and looking after the birds down there. So if you do have an interest, do stop off at the Welcome Centre or drop Saltram an email expressing your interests, and we should be able to get back to you. There is also a Green Minds event happening in November, working with us and Devon Wildlife Trust for birds on the marsh, and that's going to be Spot What's on the Marsh. So you're more than welcome to come down, and that's a good engagement way to learn your birds and learn more about what we do at Blackstone Meadow. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you, Luke. So that's the end of our questions, and come to the end of the webinar now. So thank you to the Rangers for their time, their expertise, their sharing of knowledge, and to Ellie, who's running around in the background doing some of the tech as well, and for sort of being that project officer on the project of sort of Green Minds too. Thank you to the whole National Trust project team and the property teams of staff and volunteers for supporting us here, and all the other Green Minds partners as well. So that's Plymouth City Council, Real Ideas Organisation, University of Plymouth, Plymouth College of Art, Devon Wildlife Trust and the Data Place. And then thank you to everybody for joining us. We're really glad that you were here. You asked some really interesting questions, and hopefully maybe we can do something in person next time. I stood in a field, or if this has worked for you, then maybe we'll give it another go. And thank you for bearing with us with a couple of glitches, but hopefully you found it useful. So getting some lovely messages coming through to say thank you. So yeah, brilliant. We're going to say goodbye for now. Thanks. Bye.